Okay. Are most of us feeling like we've got it? Okay. If you're not, that's okay. You can just click here to see the answer, copy the whole thing, paste it right in here. And that's what I just did. So this is working code. I run it, and look, it says hello world 1,000 times. How do you know it's 1,000 times? We could go up there and count if you want to. I'm not gonna. In fact, here, let's do this. We'll say system.out.print I. There we go. Now they're all numbered for me. And let's just check out. They start out at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. They go all the way down to 999. So yep, there are 1,000, starting with 0, that's 1,000 times that it printed hello world. Okay, my mom noticed that I was spending a lot of time with their computer that they had bought. And so she came and approached me and said, "What's going on? Teach me what you know." I said, "Okay, Mom." I sat her down and I started teaching her, here's what you do. You just have to say system.out.println hello, and then it will print hello. Now, this wasn't actually in Java. This was in BASIC back in the days, but the principle is the same. And she said to me, well, wait a minute. I had to type all of that just to make it type the same thing that you just typed. Well, then what good is it? And I said, well, I can run it a bunch of times. And I ran the program over and over, and it said hello every single time. And she said, well, that's worthless. I could just type in a document, and I wouldn't have to type in system.out.println before every word I wanted to print. And I could just look at the document as many times as I wanted. That's as far as she got in my programming lessons. And I feel that's kind of unfortunate because, you know, she missed something very powerful. But let me ask you, what good is it that you have to type all of this just for it to repeat the very same thing that you typed? I mean, really, what's the value of that?
Because you can change that.
Yeah, I can change it, but I could change a document anyway. I don't know. The message is it starts to become more powerful when you encode it, when you combine it with loops. It becomes a little more powerful when you run your program and again. Sure, I could make 1,000 copies of my document and distribute it to 1,000 people and they could all see the words I typed. But with a computer, I couldn't make a document that counts all the way up to 1,000 unless I typed in all the numbers all the way up to 1,000, right? Now all of a sudden it's doing more work than I did. I did this much typing and it did this much typing, and you know what, if I wanted it to do more, hey look, instead of 1,000, now it's 100 million. And now the computer is doing a crazy amount of work, and I assure you I would never sit there and type in 100 million lines of code into a Word document because, wow, it's still going. Apparently it takes a lot of time to print 100 million lines to the console. But what's it up to? It's only in the 300,000s. This is going to take all day. I've just locked up my machine. What do I do? Usually Control C. There's probably a run debug maybe. Huh. Oh, there's a stop button. I bet you that's it. I'll push it. Killed my program. There you go. Your students will create infinite loops. Why? Because they can. And if they're not, there's something wrong. You should encourage them to make infinite loops. Breaking the machine is what it's all about. This is how you learn. Okay, so do not be afraid to create compile bugs. Do not be afraid to try stuff that's outside of the instructions. If you're following my instructions exactly, you know, that's kind of awesome, but it would be more awesome if you didn't. Curiosity is really what this is about, right? If you have an invisibility cloak and you're not sneaking around the library in the middle of the night, come on, right? I mean, you really should be wielding your powers. Okay. What does this do exactly? Oh, one more story before I get to that. This was the only command I knew in my early days of programming, but I was so excited to be able to control a computer. I wrote a video game using nothing but print commands. Here's how it worked. I started off by putting an asterisk over here and an asterisk right there, and I printed bounding walls. And then I started scooting them over a little bit. And you can see what this does. It's going to print a running wall, right? Wait a minute. Prints hello a bunch of times. Oh, that's because that's still there. I'm just going to make that go away. Build that. Run. I printed a wall. Now that's not very impressive, but I spent days and days and days making print lines, and I had a really long program, and these walls scooted over and zoomed back and forth. And of course, I wanted a car on there that I could drive, but I didn't have one, so I cut one out of a piece of paper, and I held it up on the screen, and I said, go! And the goal was to keep your paper inside of the walls. You know, it's not very sophisticated, but it was a game. It was my very first game. I was so proud of it. Everyone in my family had to come and try to play it. And every time they touched a wall, I said, eh, because I didn't know how to program that into the computer. But you know, a little creativity and a little fun is all you need, and you can do amazing things. Okay, it was a really stupid game. Didn't make me a dime, but it got me excited. I realized that, you know, with these commands alone, you can do a lot of stuff. Okay, I'm going to press Control Z a bunch of times to undo that. Again, proving that it's totally okay to mess around. Let's look really closely at this for loop. What exactly does this mean? Again, I want to show you under the hood, not just the what it does. Okay? A for loop has three parts, separated by semicolons. I'll call this 1, this 2, and this 3. Let me be more specific. A for loop takes 3 arguments, or 3 parameters. The first parameter is performed at the beginning of the loop, before the loop happens. The last parameter is performed at the end of each loop, not just at the end of the whole thing, but the end of each loop. And the middle parameter is how long it's going to keep doing it. So at the very start, I say int I is equal to 0. Now, by the way, I can just say int I is equal to 0 right there if I want to, and have no parameter in my for loop. And this is exactly the same code. I'll prove it by running it. There you go. What this does is int I creates a variable. In other words, it says, make a magical box of type int. What's an int? Stands for integer. That's a number that from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Pi is not an integer. 3 is an integer. Do you get what an integer is? Okay, good. You can learn by example. -3, is that an integer? Yes, it is, but it's not a natural number, I think. I can't remember. The point is, integers are all the numbers that have no decimal points. Okay? Now, equals 0, that says, hey, take this 0 and put it in the box. So now my box I has a 0. There's not really a great reason why the for loop takes that first parameter. You could just stick it before the for loop, but it's kind of nice to stick it all on one line, so there you go. So we have a number. The number is I, and the number is going to start out at 0. Rather, the number is in a box called I, or a variable called I. At the end of every time in the loop, it's going to increment that number. I know I'm doing it out of order, but that's deliberate. So I is going to start at 0, then it's going to become 1, then it's going to become 2, then it's going to become 3, then it's going to become 4, then 5, then 6, then 7, then 8, then 9, then 10, all the way up to 999, right? And every single time it does that, it's going to execute these instructions. So it's as if I typed in those instructions 1,000 times. I could have just pasted those instructions 1,000 times, but do you see why this is better? Well, it is. Okay. And this is the condition. It's going to repeat this as long as I is less than 1,000. Okay. And when we're done, system.out.println, done. And just for the sake of screwing around to show you what would happen, what happens if well, let's run this again, since I added something. I printed it 1,000 times, then I printed done. What would happen if I, instead of saying I is less than 1,000, I say I is more than 1,000? Make your predictions. Place your bets. What is this code going to do?
Shut it down.
Okay, yeah, I think most of you are getting it right. So A few things. One is this. When you have questions like this, what is the right way to answer them? You can Google it, you can do lots of things, but if you just open another project, I like to always have a small little project open next to my big projects. Why? So I can just do little tests. And you can do little tests all the time. Let's see what it does, because what it does is the right answer, no matter what Google says. This is even more authoritative than that. What it actually does is it prints done. Here's what happened. We entered the loop. It said, hey, let's make a variable named I. Let's put the number 0 in it. And at the end of the loop, we're going to increment it. And we're going to repeat the loop as long as I is more than 1,000. What is I right now? 0. Is 0 more than 1,000? Oh, we're done. Okay. Now it goes down here and prints done. And that's exactly what it did. It printed done. Whereas, if I do it as long as I is less than 1,000, then counts all the way up to 1,000. A very tiny mistake can make a very big difference in code. Why? Because your machine was written by Amelia Bedelia, by however you say that name. It only does precisely what you say ask it to do. So what if we wanted to start at 1,000 and count down to 0? I equals 1,000. Instead of incrementing, we're going to decrement, right? And we're going to continue as long as I is more than or equal to 0. Sounds right, doesn't it? Okay, we build it, we run it, and let's look at the output. See how I started at 1,000 and ran down all the way to 0. How many times did I print hello world? Yeah. I did it 1001. What was that? Oh, I'll point that out. I added this extra line here. I didn't actually tell you about that, did I? I added a system.out.print I. And you know, that's actually something I neglected to emphasize. Notice a difference here. See how hello is in quotation marks? See how I is not in quotation marks? What difference do you think that means? Print I means, hey, I is a variable, print the thing that's in the box. Whereas if I say system.out.print I, you all know what that's going to do, right? It's going to print the letter I. And so I run it, and now it says 1009, 999I, 998I, 997I, and so forth. The one in quotation marks kind of mean, and I mean it. It's being really literal here. It's saying this is a string, whereas I here is a reference to this variable that I declared right there. So yeah, if you put it in quotation marks, it's a string. If you don't, the compiler is going to try to resolve it to the most recent variable that you declared. Okay, we're all good?